in it. You know, it's definitely usable. You hear most of the interview. Here we go. My interview with Nina Turner. Hey, delighted to be joined by Nina Turner, former Ohio State Senator. She was the campaign co-chair of Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign, former president of Our Revolution, and a whole lot of other titles that we don't have time for. How are you doing during these pandemic times?
Jordan, more blessed than most. Thank God for that.
So, to the very, very satisfaction of a lot of progressives in the country, you've announced you're running for the 11th district in Ohio, which Congresswoman Marcia Fudge is currently the congresswoman, but she's been appointed by President Biden to run HUD. So once she is confirmed, assuming she is, then this will be an open seat. Before we get to national politics, I've been to Cleveland a couple times. It's Cleveland, Akron are parts of this district.
Yes.
Can you kind of describe, pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, what are the issues in this district that have been swept under the rug, like so many communities like it?
Yeah, it's one and the same. So I'm glad that you said pre and post or pre and during, because we're not post pandemic. A lot of people think that the challenges that the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class are experiencing are new, but they're not. It's just that COVID-19 exacerbates those. It's almost like somebody that is having a heart attack, and instead of you trying to save their lives, it's a boulder on their chest, almost assuring their death. And that is a very visible example that I know that people can relate to. That is what COVID is doing to people who are already poor, among the working poor and the barely middle class. There are about 140 million people in this country who are low income and just flat out poor. 140 million of them. They were suffering before this pandemic. And to quote my grandmother, they are show enough. Grandma's gone to glory, but she would say the word show enough. They are show enough suffering now. And so some of the concerns in my district are the same concerns that I saw all across this country as I carried my district and was blessed to go community to community. It's jobs, increasing the minimum wage. It's healthcare. We know that now over 90 million people are uninsured or underinsured, and the millions of people who have lost their jobs, who had their healthcare connected to their job, have now lost their healthcare. It is in the immediate term, though, Jordan, the complications, especially when it comes to educating one's children. I've talked to so many parents who are now trying to homeschool, and then if you are among the poor, you might not necessarily have the computers necessary, the laptops, the internet connection, just the capacity to be able to help your children be able to keep the educational gains that they have made. So in the short term, it is employment, it is healthcare, and it is also helping parents and other caregivers navigate their immediate needs, education being one of those, being able to educate their children and not being concerned about their children losing ground, if you will.
And I think before the pandemic, parts of Cleveland, Akron have had a 20, 30-year economic pandemic because, frankly, people like Joe Biden, the president, and other Democrats and Republicans sold their jobs to other countries. I mean, Cleveland was like Flint and Detroit and many other major cities responsible for a lot of the building of America. But through trade deals like NAFTA and the proposed TPP deal, a lot of the citizens who used to have good middle class jobs, have now had to switch to working 2 to 3 jobs on top of driving Ubers and things like that. Can you kind of talk about what can Democrats and Joe Biden do? Because he has not spoken out that he will definitively not reintroduce the TPP. But there's a lot of people in the district you want to represent that haven't had full-time jobs for many years because of those trade deals.
Fair trade, Jordan, there's no doubt that one of the reasons why ex-President Trump won Ohio in 2016 was because he had a populist message. It was fake as hell, but he did have that message, and you're absolutely right. The trade deals are definitely disadvantage, and that's keeping it PG. many workers in my district and also in this state. The beautiful thing, though, about this horrible moment, having to deal with a fascist president and also the mistakes that Democrats have made along the way when it comes to jobs and trade deals, Democrats, we control both chambers and we control the executive office. And so can right some wrong, can look and reflect on the things that were not in trade deals past and chart a new path. This is the opportunity for the Democratic Party, my party, to deliver for the American people, the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class. That has got to happen. If that does not happen, 2022 is not going to be pleasant for the Democratic Party. But more important than what's pleasant or not pleasant for a party, we got flesh and blood behind these policies, behind those trade deals, people who lost their jobs and their livelihoods. And sometimes, as you know, Jordan, and I know a lot of people who are your viewers, you can have one bad thing happen in your life and it could take you years to recover. I mean, years, you know, and I have faced that myself as an individual. I've watched my parents face that, where it can just take you out. And in order for you to rebound, it's not a year, it's not 2 years. Sometimes it can take you 5, 10 years to rebound, depending on what happened and what is going on in your life. And so this moment right here. There's promise in the problem. And the Democrats, at least for 2 years, we don't know what's going to happen in the midterms, but what we do know is that for the next 2 years, the Democratic Party, this administration, has the opportunity to right some wrongs and to make some crooked paths straight.
And you've been present a couple months before primary elections, general elections, when folks like Joe Biden and other Democrats, they are very consistently showing up at these churches, preaching the good gospel about what they're going to do for black people in America. And then once they're elected, they seem to, lose their direction back to those churches and communities. They seem to not deliver. And frankly, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. Joe Biden's president because black people in Atlanta came out in unprecedented ways. Detroit, Milwaukee, a lot of the areas that they did not come out for Hillary Clinton. Are you seeing anything really that is a focus for black people? In fairness, Biden did just announce increase in food nutrition and food stamps, which is a good thing. But I'm not seeing much. It's only been a day or two, but I haven't seen much yet direct programs for these hurt communities and black Americans that he spoke about during the campaign.
The increase in food stamps, you're absolutely right. That is necessary. It is vital. People need to eat. People need somewhere to live. They have to be secure. So that's good. I'm gonna give kudos to the president. There's so much more that needs to be done. The 100-day plan, and you're right, 1 day, second day. There are many more days within this 100-day window where the president can show that he is going to return in like kind to the African American community that really put him in the office, and by extension, that working class coalition of black people, of Hispanic people, of people of other ethnicities, of young people, of progressives. Let's not forget the progressives who really, really came through to help this ticket become President Biden and Vice President Harris. We need to see more. I want to see marijuana decriminalized and also legalized. And beyond that, I also want to see economic policy put forth so that the African American community is not left out in the cold when it comes to making the money. It is not just enough to decriminalize and legalize. The federal government, along with state governments, have to change the rules of engagement. They are the referees. And so it is unfair to have this industry controlled mainly by a white businessmen. African Americans bore the brunt of going to prison, going to jail, having their entire lives and that of their families and communities disrupted and in some cases destroyed because of the war on drugs. And the Democratic Party has an awesome opportunity to correct that. That would be something that would help the African American community. So some of the things, the executive orders that they've signed, undoing the, making sure that our DACA young people are taken care of, doing away with some of the very good. There's an and to this, Jordan. And there has to be, there must be things that happen within the next 100 days that is direct, not kind of halfway, not around the corner, but directly impacts and says to the African American community, I see you and thank you for how you came out, showed up, not only to elect President Biden and also Vice President Harris, but showed up again in Georgia and did that. They did that. And now the Democrats are in power, and they must use that power to lift the people who have the greatest needs. And unfortunately, disproportionately, that is the African American community. The 140 million people I speak of, though, are people from all walks of life. It's our white sisters and brothers, our black sisters and brothers, our Hispanic sisters and brothers, our Asian, poor people who are just flat out poor are in that category, but we know disproportionately is African Americans. But in real numbers, it's our white sisters and brothers that are the majority of that number, just in the numbers and not necessarily the percentages. So there's so much work that needs to be done in this next 100 days to show the working people, the poor and the barely middle class of this country, and particularly the African American community, that they're going to get a return on their investment and that they don't have to wait several years to reap the benefits of what they came out to do.
I see a problem. I'm not trying to get you in too much trouble because you're obviously running.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, Jordan.
I see a problem when you set, now Senator Warnock in Georgia, Biden, they're sending out, campaign stuff. You elect us, you're getting a $2,000 check right out the door, $2,000 check. But that then became a $1,400 check. Now it's becoming, earliest we could do it is in April. That's what neoliberalism is. It's we could only do so much, lowering expectations, making the populace complacent with that lowering of expectations. Frankly, most other countries, a $2,000 check is happening per month, and that's the floor. Many other countries, far less wealthy than us, are doing more than that. From your view, what do you think about? We could only judge it on a few days, but they're already kind of moving back on some of the promises that were made in the run up to that Georgia special election and his campaign promises.
In fact, if what you described, Jordan, holds, which I hope that it does not hold, then it's wrong. That's simple. It's wrong. It's unacceptable. And it cannot stand. American people need relief. Democrats ran on the $2,000. Matter of fact, get the wire transfers going right now. Post haste. What are we waiting for? It'd be one thing if we were in the 90s or we were in a vibrant economy and people were not desperate. This is survival at this point for far too many Americans. Flat out survival. So forget all the okie doke, to use the technical term, and let's get this money to the people. And let's not stop there with this $2,000 that they should have been had. Let's get $2,000 a month. We have the money, as you laid out. Other countries, Japan, our sister, Canada, other industrialized nations are doing much more. We are behind. Imagine a hegemon nation like the United States of America, the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, and the people who are suffering have to grovel to get their money back. Because let's be clear, the money, the relief that we're talking about, that's our money, Jordan. That's your money. That's my money. That is the money of the people who pay taxes in this country. And for our other sisters and brothers who are too poor to pay taxes, you know what? We are all in this together. So the American people deserve relief. It is inhumane and it is unacceptable. And for you and I to be having this conversation when we just a few days from the birthday of the great Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and also the national holiday where we had so many politicians quoting the Reverend, but don't have the intestinal fortitude to be a doer of the deeds that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was fighting for and talking about. It's unacceptable, Jordan, and it cannot stand. It just cannot. And I'm heartbroken over it.
I want to ask you, I'm not asking you to get in a fight with anybody, but there's been a big battle royale in the progressive sandbox over the last few weeks over forced to vote. A lot of names being called on all sides, sellout, frauds. I don't really participate in that, but I want to ask you, if elected, by my math right now, Nancy Pelosi, as House Speaker, has a narrow, I think it's 4 or 5 seat majority. Progressives in the House, obviously the Progressive House Caucus is about 100, but let's just say capital P progressives have about 9 or 10 right now. I think 9 or 10 in a unified bloc, whether it's Medicare for all or other priorities, can frankly make demands of House Speaker Pelosi, which frankly, you look at the UK Parliament, you look at other governments, that's just common practice. If you, based on the numbers, you negotiate or make demands based on your leverage, your power. But it seems like that has not happened yet among the progressives in the House. If you come in, do you think it's a radical concept that they say, no, we're not giving you votes for X, Y, and Z unless you give us, A, B, and C?
I mean, that's how the political business is done. No, it's not radical. It's right on time. People are dying and losing their livelihoods. And I'm not the best at using analogies, but let me just say that if I want your viewers to think about if they were drowning. Do you want somebody to say, I'll get to you in March or I'll get to you in April? If you are drowning, you need somebody to jump in there right now, radically jump in there and save your life. That is the moment that we are in with the ravages of this global pandemic that has not been tamed yet. It has not been tamed yet. So imagine that you were drowning even before the pandemic. And I mean, man, you going over and over again, and you need somebody to jump the hell into the water and save you. That's the moment that we're in right now. And yes, the progressives should leverage. Absolutely, they should. And the Congressional Black Caucus and the Progressive Caucus all together. I mean, can you imagine? I can imagine this. Like, I've been playing this over in my head that I would love to see all of those caucuses come together to say we are going to do what is right, not what is. But this should be easy too. But I'll just say let's do what's right and not necessarily politically convenient. But it should. In this case, though, Jordan, I can't even. This is right, and it is politically correct to say that you're going to save the American people. I don't understand what the what is the problem. I don't understand. This just does not compute for me. So I just have this wild vision in my head that the progressive and the Congressional Black Caucus will come together and say, you know what? In the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, enough is enough. We about to deliver this right here. Don't know what else is going to happen, but this right here, we're going to deliver for the American people. It has to happen.
And last question. This isn't your first rodeo. You see what the media did to Senator Sanders in 2016, 2020. You see what the DNC did. And frankly, it might not be a presidential contest, but once Congresswoman Fudge is confirmed and this election starts drawing more media attention, my safe bet is some of these national media figures are going to treat this Ohio district race as a national race because of one person who's in it, and that would be you. It's a simple question. Are you prepared for that? And what could people do during this pandemic? Obviously, door knocking is not as simple now. But what could people do to not allow the media disinformation, the propaganda? I'm sure they'll go back all the way to when you were a kid and the cookie jar. What can people do so that you have a fair shot at winning this seat, the 11th district seat in Ohio?
And that's all we're asking for is fairness. I'm asking for the voters of my district and also the people of this nation to judge me by the body of work. Nobody is perfect. I certainly have not had a perfect path, but I have been committed all of my life from my upbringing to this moment to serve, not just in elected capacity, but to be motivated by to be motivated to be motivated by pushing for what is right, just, and good for the least of these, our sisters and brothers. So no matter what the media is going to try to throw at me, I want folks to understand my record. A daughter of Cleveland, a Cleveland City Councilwoman, a mother, a wife, a sister, raised in this district, having been in all three categories that you and I have been talking about. I have been poor. I've been among the working poor. I've been among the barely middle class. I had a mother who died at the very young age of 42 years old with her dreams deferred, 7 children. I'm the oldest, having to take that on. First generation college graduate, still paying off college debt, have made mistakes financially, have been climbing and trying to get it right on behalf of my family, and by extension, be an asset to my community and to this nation. Not perfect, nobody is. So when they come, just remember all of the work and my whole body of work. What people can do, Jordan, is the most important: time, talent, and treasure. That is what progressive candidates like me, who are going against the grain, who are not going to equivocate for what we believe in, who I can work with anybody, because that's another thing they want to throw at me. I can work with anybody, but I don't acquiesce to anybody. Working with does not mean acquiescing to. And when my residents send me there, if I am so blessed to serve this community, they're sending me there to serve, to be of service to them, and not to necessarily kowtow to. I'll say it this way: I don't worship at the feet of any man or any woman. I don't worship at the feet of any of a party. Yes, I am a Democrat, but I am a Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm type Democrat, unbought and unbossed. I am a Fannie Lou Hamer type Democrat, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And even in Fannie Lou Hamer's day, when she coalesced with her or collaborated with her white contemporaries who were sick and tired of the status quo of their day, and formed the Freedom Party. All folks got to do is go back there. That was, you talking about being patriotic. You talking about loving a party so much so that you're going to get together with other poor people, white poor people, and say, we're not going to take this anymore. And we're going to come together and create a different party, because the Democratic Party is not doing right by our poor people. I am a Congressman Lewis Stokes, or Mayor Carl B. Stokes, or Senator Howard Metzenbaum type of Democrat. So if people want to know, that's the type of Democrat I am. How can people help? Time, talent, and treasure. Yes, we cannot necessarily go door to door the way we could before COVID, but we're going to do some things, and we're going to do it very safely. Things that people can do from the safety of their home, whether it's making calls, whether it's text messaging. So please, and donating. Our average donation right now, Jordan, is $26. I have been so humbled and heartened by the fact that the very people that you and I discuss and have discussed from the moment we met, in your work as a journalist and my work as a modern day freedom fighter, those very people who are suffering and were suffering before this pandemic are the ones that are fueling this campaign. And I want to say thank you to those people. The average donation is $26. And so I just need people to give what they can. If it's $3, $5, $11. And then if you can't give money, to sign up and volunteer to help our campaign. And they can go to ninaturner.com to. When I am elected, not only am I elected to serve my district, but everything that a federal representative does, by extension, impacts the entire nation. And I want the people who support this campaign to know, the people who live in my district who will give me the privilege to serve, and also the people who are living vicariously through the people of my district, to know that when I win this race, this is their race too. When I go through the halls of Congress, I am carrying with me their hopes, their dreams, their fears, and also their possibilities with me to the people's house.
And I forgot one last question. On the campaign trail, will you be sporting Bernie's mittens?
Without a doubt, baby. You know, I ain't one for mittens, but the senator did that. All the memes rule and order some mittens. Yes, I support Senator Sanders' mittens.
Isn't that interesting? The media loves him now that he's not a threat. Look at that. All right. Thank you.
Well, he's the chair. Now, come on now, Jordan. He's the chair of the budget committee. Don't sleep on that.
That's true. That's true.
Because let's face it, I've worked in the mainstream media and been blessed to do so. Glad to be a progressive. I think progressives should be in every space. In the mainstream media space, they should be in corporate boardrooms. We need to be everywhere, preaching and preaching the gospel, what needs to be done that is right, just, and good. But I just got to commend you. You, from the beginning of the Flint crisis, have been there, and you are still there, even though again, quote my grandmother, but not many people are talking about this issue. It has seemed to have disappeared, but the pain that the citizens of Flint, Michigan are feeling are not going anywhere anytime soon. And some of that pain is going to be generational. And so I just want to take the time to commend you for being in that fight, even if it is not, it hasn't been fun, it hasn't been pleasant. You are like a voice in a wheel, continuing to hold up and to discuss what is happening to our sisters and brothers in Flint. It could have happened anywhere in this country, but it happened in Flint, and it is disproportionately impacting the Black community. And I just want to thank you. I want to be one. There are many people, I'm sure, who thank you all the time, but I want to thank you for your investigative work and continue to push it. And what you and I believe that there's going to be a day of reckoning because of somebody like you and what you're doing. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And by the way, if the truth is not exposed in Flint, then places like Cleveland, which have significant lead problems, will not get attention either. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. You can follow her at the website she just gave, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, Senator Turner. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you. That was Nina Turner, running for Congress in Ohio's 11th District. If you want more info on her campaign, ninaturner.com. Sorry that the video was a little choppy while I was recording it. I don't know if it was her side or my side. Something was going on, but Colin, I think, did a good job editing over that. I think there's a lot of things that she said that stood out to me. First and foremost, I'm seeing some people in the chat like, grow up, folks. Oh, you're already condemning her as a sellout because she's not screaming as loud as you'd like. She got to get elected first. So, it probably wouldn't be the smartest thing for Nina Turner to go publicly ranting against AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. You have to have some strategy to the things you do. You can't just rant because we're angry. So I think some people are making this ridiculous claim that she's not aggressive enough for you, or you don't trust her. Listen, I don't worship politicians. If she gets elected, I'll hold her accountable like the next one. But as far as I could tell, she hasn't done anything to demonstrate she is dishonest or not genuine. And she just answered. She didn't have to attack AOC or the squad, but you don't need to call them the fraud squad to disagree. You could disagree in a decent way. So I think right there you heard her. Yeah, I think we should use our numbers. And if I get in there, I will push that we use our numbers. When I say we, the progressives in the House use their numbers. I mean, we got it right here. Colin made this. The top is the progressives, even though they totally bombed and chickened out at Force the Vote. Right under them, I mean, we need to update this now because they're not incoming anymore, but those four on the bottom are now part of the progressives in the House. And then you have Nina as a question mark. If she gets elected, there's no legitimate reason that if Nancy Pelosi only has a small majority, she's got a 4-seat majority in the House, meaning if she loses 5 or 6 Democrats, she's not getting diddly squat passed in the House because Republicans aren't going along with the Democrats on most things. So I think Nina Turner's answer was pretty clear. Absolutely, we should be using our leverage. And you don't need, and it would be stupid of her running in a pretty, I don't want to say establishment, but a pretty traditional Democratic Party district in Ohio where the voters tend to vote for Democrats to go to war with the Democratic Party right now. Let her get elected. So, anyway, I also liked her answer on Biden. Listen, I'm going to be fair while criticizing Biden. He did just repeal a lot of terrible things Trump did. I think it was good repealing the Keystone XL pipeline. Now we need to light an inferno under his behind to also put a stop to the Dakota Access Pipeline, put a stop to Line 3 pipeline in Minnesota. There's a whole lot of other pipelines other than Keystone we got to get him on. Increasing food stamps, very important, so I give him credit for that. But there's also some pretty crappy things. This moonwalking away from a $2,000 check. They're talking now, oh, no, we meant a $1,400 check to go with $600 check. No, you said, Warnock running in Georgia said, you elect us, you're getting a $2,000 check immediately. And by the way, the $2,000 check is not enough anyway. We should be getting that every month during this pandemic. So that's something. Now there's reports that he wants to reverse one of the few good things Trump did, which is pull troops out of Iraq. He wants to increase troops in Iraq. So he's already handing out favors to Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, the defense contractors. Now Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are saying, oh, no, next week, we're not returning next week. We're going to do committee work virtually. Are you crazy? Literally, it came out yesterday, 1.4 million. 1.4 million more people filed unemployment claims. The number is now, I believe, 16 to 17 million are filing unemployment claims, and the Democrats are doing a virtual committee week. Get your ass back to Washington, and you have the White House, you have the House, and you have the Senate now. There is no excuses, zero excuses anymore not to have immediate, bold policies. And if you don't complain and don't blame progressives when you get wiped out in the 2022 midterms, which as of now, I think it is looking like they will be wiped out. Here you have it, the numbers that came out yesterday. 1.4 million more unemployment claims. It's the highest since August. Big jump in the PUA applications, which are for gig workers and program. Overall, 16 million were on unemployment at the start of 2021. And frankly, we don't know if that number is going to go up. It probably will, because now you have coronavirus mutations and variants flying around America. So the good thing, Biden increased food stamps, good. Repealed Keystone XL, good. Repealed a lot of Trump's terrible environmental rollbacks, good. Restored DACA, good. But it's not enough just to wipe out the terrible things Trump did. We need to, quote unquote, build back better, which was a bullshit campaign slogan that means nothing. We need immediate monthly checks. Secondly, Biden and his team, their great idea is to give more federal subsidies to COBRA for the people that lost their health care. Let me repeat that. Do you know what COBRA is? It's the biggest scam. Well, the for-profit healthcare system is the biggest scam. But COBRA is the biggest scam. I was on it for 2 years after TYT let me go. You have to pay, in New York, it was $650 I had to pay per month just to keep the insurance I had with my former employer. So $600 a month just to have it still, but you still have to pay the deductibles. You still have to pay the copays. You still have to pay the co-insurance. It is a huge scam. And Biden's answer, as tens of millions more now have no health care because they're wonderful employer-sponsored health care that Pete Buttigieg and Biden during the campaign were, people don't want to lose they love their private health insurance. Their answer is to give more money to COBRA, give more federal money to COBRA. But the problem with that is it don't matter if you give subsidies to COBRA. People still have to pay the copays. People still have to pay the deductibles for their plans. So how are you going to achieve that if you don't have a job? If you don't have a job, You, the government, the president, can give subsidies to your donors, i.e. the for-profit healthcare system, COBRA. That's what it is. You're giving them more money to the private health insurance industry because they took care of you during the campaign. They're going to take care of you while you're president because they're going to keep hoarding money and buying you off because we live in the United Corporations of America. So, okay, if I don't have health care now, how's it going to help me that you're giving more subsidies to COBRA? So instead of paying $600 a month to COBRA, maybe I'll pay $250 a month to COBRA instead. Not to mention, after I pay the $250 just to have this scam, you're going to pay for my deductibles, Joe Biden. You're going to pay for my copays. You're going to pay for my co-insurance. Here's by the way, how fraudulent our for-profit healthcare system is. My wife's in the super chat. I was recently married. No, I did not marry her for health insurance. But since we got married, I was able to get on her health insurance. Do you know what the deductible is for this health insurance? $3,000 between the two of us. Do you know I just had an endoscopy because you know about my stomach problems? Then the doctor sent me for a CAT scan. You know the bills for these? $1,500 for an endoscopy. $900 for a chest x-ray. And that's with insurance. So, when I'm not giving Joe Biden a honeymoon, okay? You ran as middle-class Joe. You ran as the savior of America's soul or whatever bullshit you were spewing. It ain't, claps for repealing the toxic things Donald Trump did. Claps for repealing Keystone XL. Now do Dakota Access Pipeline. But we need, as Bernie Sanders is proposing, people who lost their health insurance during this pandemic, cover them under Medicare. Period. Point blank. We need $2,000 a month, not a $1,400 check to go with a $600 check. We need, and sorry that I didn't ask Nina this, no, we don't need an eviction moratorium because when the moratorium is up, whenever CNBC, CNN, and MSNBC push the unemployment number lowering, which the unemployment number is not actually representative of how the economy is doing. It's representative of how many people have stopped looking for work. It's representative of how the stock market is doing. But typically, a low unemployment number, yeah, it's technically a good thing, but it's not the same as the real unemployment number. And it also, a lot of times, the unemployment number lowers because people stop looking for work because they can't find it. So we don't need an eviction moratorium. We need a cancellation of people's rent, retroactive to March 2020. And you want to know something? If you have the money to continually print money for war, if you have the money to continually print money for subsidies for Goldman Sachs, Pfizer, Raytheon, and the whole rest of the lot, ExxonMobil, they all get subsidies from the federal government. If we have money for that, you have money, pay the landlords, pay the banks what the rent was owed to them. Because there are a lot of good, small landlords that are not multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerates that own these buildings, that they need the rent because they have to pay their mortgage. So, Biden, like that. Modern monetary theory, baby. We have the money. We print it. Stop pretending there's an issue with debt and deficit. I've had Steve Grumbine on plenty. Pay people's rent retroactive to March so that when you do away with this eviction moratorium, what are people going to do that owe between $10,000 and $20,000 in back pay for rent? What are they going to do? You think they're going to be able to pay that altogether? You think their landlords and the banks that own those companies, hence the banks ultimately own, the banks are ultimately to be paid a lot of that rent? You think they're going to put them on generous payment plans that they could pay over 20 years? No. So, thank you to Nina Turner. We will follow her campaign. I would say right now, it's kind of the early stages of her campaign, only because Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who Biden appointed to run HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, she hasn't been officially confirmed yet. So technically, Marcia Fudge is still the Congresswoman. When she's confirmed, then it's off to the races. Nina Turner, several others in the Cleveland area have announced they're running for this seat. So when the campaign goes into high gear, this is certainly a campaign I think Status Coup is going to have to be on the ground for. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how bad this mutation is. Obviously, we want to be in the field as much as we can, but I have to be safe. I have a wife to think about. I have a dog now to think about. Did you not see the picture of my beautiful new dog? Let me find her. Millie. Oh, no. Where's Millie? Hold on. Let me find her. There's my beautiful little new dog, Millie Willie, straight from Russia. So we just got Millie. She's a beautiful, we think she's a half mini pinscher, but we're not positive. She came with other dogs from Russia. So I hope Rachel Maddow doesn't get hysterical that we're part of the we're Russian assets. We checked her for GPS and chips. There's no CIA or KGB devices in there that we know of. But I certainly hope to be on the ground to cover Nina's race. Because let me tell you something. I don't worship politicians, but if Nina Turner gets in there, that's a good thing for the progressive movement. A very good thing for the progressive movement. So, moving on, before I move on to the next topic, I'm about to go ape shit on the media, and I'm about to show you some emails. So don't you go anywhere. Don't you go anywhere. I'm about to show you the behind the scenes. I'm about to name names, and I'm about to show you why the media is corrupt. That's why we created Status Coup, because we need a journalistic coup d'etat in this country. Also, big shout out, we got 3 new members. 3 new Status Coup members while that interview is airing. Welcome new Status Coup member Skylar. Welcome new Status Coup member Davon. Welcome new Status Coup member Jim. Holy cow. We're now at 1,845. 1,845. So that would be 155 members away from 2,000 paid members. We really, really want to get to 2,000 as quickly as we can. Obviously, tough economic times right now, so if you can't do it, you can't do it. But if you can, support us. Statuscoup.com/join. Join us for as low as $5 a month, and you will get access to our monthly members call, which we're going to do next week, as well as our members Discord, which I mentioned. If you haven't gotten a link to our Discord, please email us. If you're a member and you have not gotten the link to the Discord, email us, info@statuscoup.com. That's info@statuscoup.com, and we'll make sure you are invited into our Discord. Nestor, $2. Appreciate it. Seth Peterson, great interview with Nina. $30. Great interview with Nina. I'm optimistic that she'll bring the fire to Congress. We still need to keep her accountable, and I know you will not hold back. Of course. I like her, but, if she starts doing corrupt things or moving away from promises, she'll hear from me publicly. All right, let's get to it. So, folks, I think that, to me, I've always told you, the reason I continually cover the Flint water crisis, and Jen covers it too with me, and for those of you that don't know, we just broke a pretty bombshell story, I would say. We did it with The Intercept, so we appreciate The Intercept working with us on this. We broke a major story that shows the former governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder, who was just charged with a crime last week, a misdemeanor, but he was charged, that in October 2014, and I'll find it right here, him, the governor, and his chief of staff, and the health director were involved in an avalanche of phone calls. On October 16th, here's more of the calls. And then on October 17th, more calls. And why is that important? Jordan, you might say, I don't remember what I had for breakfast, let alone why was October 2014 important? because October 2014 was 6 months after the Flint water switch. By that point, you had residents showing up with brown water to City Hall. You had residents' children showing up with rashes, losing hair. The Snyder administration was full aware of what was going on. But particularly in October, you had officials in Snyder's health department and Snyder's environmental department trading emails and phone calls about a deadly bacterial outbreak from the water. It's a waterborne bacterial outbreak that was increasing, and there was an outbreak of it in Genesee County, where Flint is part of Genesee County. So right at the time, Snyder's health department, Snyder's environmental department were emailing and calling each other about the Legionella outbreak in Flint. Snyder, his chief of staff, his health director are on the phone like a bunch of drunken teenagers for 2 straight days. Snyder's chief of staff and health director, we found, they spoke 9 times in 2 days. And four of those 9 calls, as soon as the chief of staff and the health director get off the phone, immediately the chief of staff calls the governor. That's what you call a cutout. So that Snyder doesn't have to directly speak with the health director. He has his chief of staff do it, and then the chief of staff reports to the governor. We also found, just a few days after these phone calls, there was a governor's briefing. A governor's briefing. Right here. 2 boil water advisories in Flint lead to all advisories to be sent to the director, meaning the environmental director. Governor's office to be informed of what's happening. Coliform issue led to residual issue. GM now has issue with using Flint water and chloride. Genesee County has seen an increase in Legionella. McLaren Hospital has detected Legionella. That's 2 mentions of the deadly Legionella outbreak. And why is that important, folks? Because Rick Snyder went in front of Congress. He said, I didn't know about the Legionella outbreak in Flint until January 2016. October 2014, January 2016. That's 16 months. Said I didn't know about it till January 2016. I held a press conference right after, the day after I found out. Well, what are you and your chief of staff and your health director on the phone for 2 days straight, an avalanche of phone calls? Why is there a briefing addressed to you, governor's briefing, that mentions Legionella twice? This is a governor, by the way. It's been reported. His officials told investigators. He reads everything that's sent to him. He doesn't miss a thing. He's an information sponge. So we found other things that we reported in this story, including Snyder's environmental department director met with City of Flint officials at the end of that month, at the end of October 2014. In that meeting, they discussed the Legionella outbreak. This is the environmental director that reports to Governor Snyder. They discussed the Legionella outbreak that was going on. And an environmental official in that meeting said, this is an issue that, quote, may blow, meaning may blow up and become a PR nightmare. That was said in that meeting. So what I just showed you that we broke, Jen and I, that's pretty big smoking gun information. That's not my opinion, by the way, that this is a cover-up, that this is smoking gun information. We found, and it's in the story. If you haven't read the story, I truly, truly encourage you, read it and share it. I just dropped the link in there. This is what investigators on the Flint water investigation, who were on the investigation from 2016 through 2019, they concluded this is evidence that Governor Snyder was involved in a cover-up. Let me repeat that. I'll just read it from here. This was the special prosecutor. I obtained a subpoena that he sent the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, who was one of the groups that were involved in that mad dash of phone calls. Special Prosecutor Flood subpoenaed Michigan Health and Hospital Association in late 2016 to produce relevant documents pertaining to its communications with the Snyder administration about Legionella. In his petition to subpoena Michigan Health and Hospital Association, obtained by The Intercept, Flood wrote that Michigan Health and Hospital Association joined Snyder and his top officials in keeping the information about the outbreak from the public. Quote, the evidence shows the governor, his administration, Director Lyon, and the MHA knew about this outbreak of Legionnaires in October 2014 and were interested in keeping the information from going public, he wrote, referencing the calls. He went on to note MHA and local water officials, MHA is Michigan Health and Hospital Association, at local water officials at the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality held the call on Flint's Legionella outbreak on March 19th, 2015. At the bottom of the meeting update, Janice Jones, Michigan Health and Hospital Association's office coordinator, shared details of a call she received from state environmental official Carrie Monosmith. Quote, Carrie has indicated that Legionnaire's outbreak is expected to hit the newspapers in Flint concerning the situation with McLaren Hospital, and it is possible that Michigan Health and Hospital Association may be called. Quote, this is from the subpoena that we obtained. Todd Flood wrote, the content of this message conveyed by Miss Monosmith is very concerning because not only had the outbreak still not been disclosed to the public at this time, but the DEQ was proactively contacting the MHA in the event the news hits the papers, Flood wrote. Moreover, Ms. Monosmith was not contacting the Michigan Health and Hospital Association to give them a heads up that they, the state agency, would be alerting the public. Instead, she was issuing this warning because the situation had been intentionally suppressed from the public's knowledge, and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality was trying to prepare for it getting out. Let me put this in English, folks. Governor Snyder, his chief of staff, the state health director, this Michigan Health and Hospital Association were all on the call over 2 days. Were all on the phone over 2 days in October 2014. Rapid fire, rapid fire, rapid fire, rapid fire, 2 straight days. While Legionella, the deadly waterborne disease that resulted from the Flint River switch, while that was running roughshod through Flint's water, the state says 12 people died. That's a BS number. PBS reported 115 people were listed as having pneumonia in Flint in 2014 and 2015. That's the years that Flint was on the Flint River. That's a 43% increase. A 43% increase from the time period before that. 115 people had pneumonia, 43% increase, and scientists believe a lot of those 115 people, they had Legionella. So they believe the number is significantly more. I also have reason to believe, and to be clear, because, some outlets that claim to be progressive push BS and present it as reporting. To be clear, I don't have evidence of this yet. This is just, I'm telling you, I have reason to believe. I don't have evidence of this yet. I have reason to believe that during the Flint water crisis, meaning when Flint was on the Flint River, 2014 and 2015, I have reason to believe that local Flint hospitals who had pneumonia patients, the doctors were instructing nurses, do not test them for Legionella. Meaning, if you had pneumonia, you were in a Flint hospital in 2014, 2015, doctors were instructing nurses, do not test them for Legionella. Kind of, can't find what you don't look for. Nurses, I have several Flint residents who told me, on the record, they were told by nurses that nurses were told, just put down pneumonia, don't put down Legionella. So the true death count from the Legionella outbreak, which is a bacterial waterborne disease, people that die from it, it is the worst pneumonia you could experience. Young people died from it in Flint, as well as old people. That this governor, there is evidence that this governor knew about it 16 months earlier than he told Congress. And I have a statement from the Democratic House Oversight Committee on this. Shockingly, it's not so strong. So why am I telling you this? I want to get to the media, because part of why Flint is so important, it shows you media complicity in cover-ups. It shows you the media intentionally choosing to bury information, to not report on information that is significant, that is criminal. Why the media is doing that, we'll get to that in a minute. But I want you for a second, put yourself in a journalist's shoes for a second. Forget a journalist, just as a person with brains, because all my audience has brains. If I or Jen, if we came to you, literally came to you physically, because I did. I had a meeting with the Detroit Free Press. I had a meeting with their investigations editor. So the editor who runs investigations for the Detroit Free Press is the biggest newspaper in the state of Michigan. It has free press in the title. I met with him in a parking lot in Michigan. We spoke in our cars because of the pandemic with our windows open. Okay? I literally handed him the evidence. Yeah, I'm about to get to the point, Jeremy. Relax. I literally handed him the evidence. Okay? I'm not going to say more, but I handed him evidence of these phone calls. I handed him evidence of the briefing that was sent to Snyder on Legionella. I handed him evidence of several other things that I haven't reported yet. Stay tuned for that. Evidence of potential destruction of evidence by Snyder and his administration. I handed him multiple smoking guns, physically. I'm not saying I told him about it. I handed him the evidence. He said to me, and I quote, "I regret that we haven't done more on Flint." Just, by the way, he rolled in with a very, very nice BMW. Not criticizing people who work in media for making money, but just to give you a picture of this guy's socioeconomic status. This editor rolled in with a very, very nice BMW. By the way, I appreciate him buying me a chocolate croissant and coffee. He did buy my coffee at a chocolate croissant. So he said, and I quote, "I regret we haven't done more on Flint. We've done mostly on the medical side. We haven't done much on investigating, what happened." I said to him, I was kissing his ass a little bit because I want the Detroit Free Press to do the story. So I said, well, here's your opportunity to make up for it. I'm handing it to you. I even suggested, because I know a lot of these corporate media outlets, they want to take the credit, even though we did all the work. So I even suggested, people say I have a massive ego. Do you know how many times I've offered to corporate outlets, throw one of your reporters' names on the story with me and Jen? Hell, put your reporter first. Of course, I'm human. I want credit. But I will have your reporter be on the story first. So it looks like we just helped out here. Because to me, justice is more important than my ego. To me, justice is more important than getting the main credit. He says to me, well, what you have here is really big, but it's also kind of circumstantial. We don't know what was said on the phone. So I said to him, first of all, we're not criminal lawyers. We don't have to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. Most investigative reporting compiles levels of circumstantial evidence. Frankly, most criminal cases compile a lot of circumstantial evidence. So when you say this is a lot of circumstantial evidence, well, do you think they were all on the phone this much discussing the weather? And by the way, I am not saying they were on the phone talking about Legionella. This is what the criminal investigation led by prosecutors, retired FBI agents, retired judges, that's what they concluded. Because the chief of staff, Snyder's chief of staff, and the health director The first time they ever spoke on the phone was in August of 2014. That's the first time investigators found that the chief of staff and the health director spoke on the phone was August 2014. That's the same month that a Flint hospital, McLaren, first detected Legionella, the deadly waterborne outbreak. So follow with me. First time these two speak on the phone, Snyder's chief of staff and health director. They began their search of the calls from 2013. So the first time they speak, beginning looking at 2013, is August 2014, when this hospital finds Legionella in its water. The next time they speak is October 16th. They speak 7 times. First time, August, one time they speak. The next time, October 16th, they speak 7 times. October 17th, another 2 times. Of those 9 calls, 4 of those calls, the chief of staff hangs up with the health director, immediately calls the governor. You think that's circumstantial? The fact that 2 of those calls was the chief of staff with the Michigan Health and Hospital Association. Why is that important? Because the Michigan Health and Hospital Association has member hospitals. One of its member hospitals is McLaren Hospital. McLaren Hospital is where they found significant levels of Legionella, a deadly waterborne bacteria, in its system. So why was the chief of staff on the phone with the health director, the governor, and this Michigan Health and Hospital Association, who one of its members is McLaren? Oh, by the way, the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, it has a PAC, like a super PAC. You know who chairs their PAC? A McLaren Hospital executive. McLaren Hospital is where it had the Legionella outbreak. So again, I told this editor, I'm not some, new Cub Scout reporter who's drawing a conclusion too quick. I'm telling you, and I have the documents here, this is what the criminal investigation concluded, not just me. So he says to me, all right, well, I think there's a lot. I said, by the way, forget the calls. I'm handing you a briefing. This is a briefing. It's titled Governor's Briefings. I'm handing it to you. It's from October 2014. Governor's Briefings. Who's the governor? Rick Snyder. It mentions Legionella twice. He tells Congress, I didn't know anything about it till January 2016. October 2014, January 2016. Told him a whole lot of other things. He says to me, you done really good work here. Give me a couple days, maybe a week. I got to talk to my boss. He mentioned Jim Schaefer, who I think is the editor-in-chief of the Detroit Free Press. By the way, the Detroit Free Press is part of the USA Today network. The USA Today network. So I give him a week. I didn't reach out to any other outlet because I wanted this in the Detroit Free Press. Not because I'm, so in love with the Detroit Free Press, but if it gets broken in the largest paper in Michigan, A, other Michigan outlets pick it up. B, the national media would probably pick it up if it's in the Detroit Free Press. That's how I believe it would happen. So that's why I always, for all my Flint stuff, I first went to the Detroit Free Press, Detroit News. Okay? Here's what the email I got back from this guy. I have blacked out his actual email address for privacy. Hey, Jordan. Thanks for coming out to Ann Arbor and sending along formal pitch afterwards. I know you have put a lot of reporting time and effort into the Flint story. The Flint story, by the way, that he told me we regret not doing more on. I reviewed all of the material you shared here. After we finished publishing another project this weekend, I also had a chance to chat about this with my boss, Jim. As of right now, we're going to take a pass. You have a good amount of new reporting, and the additional phone call information is very interesting, building on your earlier work. But we feel like it's not something that we can invest in at this time. Happy to discuss more at some point later by phone if you would like. So, I don't want to condescend to you, my audience, but let me explain a few things about journalism. Yes, there are your average Happens to freelance journalists all the time. You pitch a story, whether it's to the Rolling Stone magazine, to other outlets that might take freelancers' work, and you are very passionate about that story, and you think it's the next Watergate, and they don't. For whatever reason, they pass. Happens all the time. But to me, this is a lot different than that. This is a lot different to that. And by the way, criminally, there are legal standards where if an attorney general, if a chief legal officer of a state does not prosecute for certain crimes, they could be held accountable. So to me, I believe journalistically, there are certain things, if they are presented to you, that if you decide not to do it, you are not deciding not to do it as a simple journalistic decision. Yeah, we don't really think there's enough here. Yeah, we agree there's a little smoke here, but we don't think it's enough smoke. You're making a decision not to do it for a reason that is not journalistic. When a freelancer, I don't work for the Detroit Free Press, so when a freelance journalist who, by the way, has a track record, we broke stories with Vice last year, I've broken stories before on Flint, has a track record of A, having strong sources, meaning I have sources that know a lot. I'm not going to go further on who they are, obviously. I've never had to correct any of my reporting because it's all fact-based. Frankly, part of the reason the governor's right-hand man just was charged with perjury, extortion, obstruction of justice, and misconduct in office is because of the story Jen and I broke with Vice. They cited misuse of state funds. The misuse of state funds was handing out money to sick residents so that they would shut up, i.e. payoffs. So when you're telling me, after meeting with me, saying we regret not doing more, you have some interesting new information. Interesting. An avalanche of phone calls between the governor, his chief of staff, and health director. That's interesting? No, that's a goddamn smoking gun. Journalistically. We can't invest in it? Well, I did a little homework. You know how many reporters the Detroit Free Press has in its investigative unit? 6 or 7? I think it's 6, maybe 7. So you got 6 or 7 reporters. Granted, there's a pandemic going on. Michigan has been hit hard. Detroit's been hit hard, absolutely. You had a kidnapping attempt against the governor. You have a lot of white militias going on in Michigan, threatening the governor, the attorney general, pro-Trump people. There is quite a lot going on that the Detroit Free Press has to cover. But I and Jen, we have done 80 to 90% of the reporting. So what are you investing in? Yeah, you have to edit it. Maybe you want us to go further and gather more information, but we've done 80% of the work. So to that editor, and I'm about to show you another one, I do not believe that is the reason the Detroit Free Press passed on the story. I do not believe they couldn't invest in it. Detroit Free Press, part of the USA Today network, they got a whole lot more resources than The Intercept does. They have more resources than Vice does. And by the way, The Intercept, I know there's people criticizing them online, whatever. You could read or not read whatever you want. We got this done relatively quickly. Because when you are good journalists, and there's plenty of them at The Intercept, including Ryan Grimm and my editor, Jen and my editor at The Intercept, if you're a good journalist, a good editor, But more importantly, you're not corrupt. Interesting that you could really find time to invest in stories like this. So I don't really think that people understand. I didn't create Status Coup with Jen. Jen and I co-founded it on bumper stickers that the corporate media is corrupt. I'm here to show you the corporate media is corrupt. And by the way, if you want to be a devil's advocate, Jordan, and say, well, it's the Detroit Free Press. This is Flint. So maybe they didn't do it because it's not... Spare me. First of all, the Flint water crisis is connected to Detroit because Flint used to get its water from Detroit, so there is a connection. Secondly, this is the biggest cover-up of the 21st century. Yeah, you could argue maybe Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, I don't want to minimize what those women went through, but this led to people dying, and we don't know how many people have died. This led to children forever having brain damage. So, to me, name a bigger cover-up of this century. 9/11? I mean, name a bigger cover-up on the domestic level. I handed it to the Detroit Free Press. They told me we can't invest in it. After this editor, when we met in person, tells me I regret not doing more. They should explain to the people of Flint. They should explain to the people of Detroit, who also have dirty water, why it is they didn't just choose not to cover it. They choose to cover it up. And you want to know how I know? All right, you want to pass on this smoking gun information? That's terrible enough. They won't cover it after the fact. They won't report. It happens all the time. The majority of content you see out there online is media outlets reporting on what other media reports broke. Other outlets broke. It's called aggregation. So they won't even report what we found. And they know what we found is factual because the editor saw the proof. I handed it to him. So you won't run the story originally and you won't report on it after? Why is that? Do you get money, the Detroit Free Press, from the state of Michigan in tax subsidies? Maybe you have advertisers you don't want to ruffle feathers with? Maybe your advertisers are indirectly or directly involved in the Flint water crisis? You tell me how journalists present to you not circumstantial evidence, evidence from a criminal investigation, which, oh, by the way, I showed him that the original Flint water investigation, because there were two. One was from 2019, one was from 2016 to 2019, and then the new Attorney General came in, Dana Nessel, and she fired them all and started her new one. The original investigation, they were going to charge Governor Snyder with misconduct in office. They were going to charge him with neglect of duty. And at the time they were fired, they were gunning for involuntary manslaughter against Governor Rick Snyder. Let me repeat, involuntary manslaughter. Since our story with The Intercept came out, two other journalists, one a Pulitzer Prize winner, Charlie LaDuff, major Michigan reporter, and Kayla Rubbles with PBS, they independently confirmed what we reported, that the original team was going to charge misconduct in office and were shooting for involuntary manslaughter. That's the original team. The current AG, they just charged the governor with a misdemeanor. One Flint resident called it a parking ticket for poisoning a whole community. So I need people to understand this is not just about lazy media. This is not just about bad media. This is about corrupt media. This is about corrupt individuals. Because, Mitt Romney said corporations are people. Well, media is made up of people. I want to show you another, even more maddening exchange I had last year in April. We spoke with the Detroit News, which, frankly, did press releases for Governor Snyder for years. It skews conservative. Already, after Snyder is charged, they're doing columns, opinion pieces on why this is a grave danger to public officials. It's going to make public officials think twice. So they were in the tank for Snyder, but they also are a big, big paper. So they wouldn't do the story that we ended up doing with Vice. If you remember, we broke a story with Vice last April that Snyder knew about the Legionella outbreak. We didn't have the calls then, but we had other information that Snyder's top advisor and best friend and right-hand man, if you think in the mafia terms, consigliere, was going around town offering payoffs to sick Flint residents. That right-hand man was just charged, partially because of our reporting with Vice, which, by the way, you made happen because you've paid for us to continually go back to Flint, sign up as a Status Coup member, help us to cover Flint and much, much more in the field. It actually takes money to do investigative reporting. You might want to tell Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks that, because they raised $2 million for additional reporters to do quote-unquote investigative reporting, and then they fired them all a year later. Riddle me that. So, Detroit News, after we broke this Vice story, here's what he told me. Why the Detroit News? This is Gary Miles. He's the editor-in-chief, top editor, Detroit News. Here's what he told me in April about why they're not going to cover the bombshells that we broke. Hi, Jordan. As you know, a lot about this incredible episode has been covered, but we are still reviewing your excellent work to evaluate which and how new threads you expose can and should be tied together, especially those that don't rely on anonymous sources with our own reporting. There's a good chance it will be with some of our own reporting as well, when some of the latest COVID-19 crisis abates. Well done on your part. Wow. First of all, I don't know if Gary with the Detroit News knows this, but when journalists obtain confidential documents, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, Reuters, if they obtain documents from a criminal investigation, if they obtain documents from, you name it, something criminal, confidential, the military, you name it, 10 out of 10 times it's anonymous, unless it's Daniel Ellsberg or Edward Snowden, the rare exceptions of brave whistleblowers. 10 out of 10 times it's anonymous. You want to know why? Because you're obtaining it from sources that don't have authorization to be giving you the information. I know that's complicated for the editor-in-chief of the Detroit News. Secondly, he mentioned anonymous sources. We opened the story. Let me get it for you. We opened the story for Vice at the 2019 January 2019 inauguration of Gretchen Whitmer. Governor Snyder approached Karen Weaver, who was then the mayor of Flint, a city of nearly 100,000 people that was still reeling from financial decay and a toxic water crisis. Quote, "You have a lot of influence with him," Weaver remembered a worried Snyder saying to her about Elijah Cummings, who was still alive at this time. At the time, Cummings was incoming chairman of the powerful U.S. House Oversight Committee. Snyder asked Weaver to get Cummings to back off from investigating him, emphasizing that he wanted to move on with his life as a private citizen. He said, quote, "It would go a long way if the request to the congressman came from her," Weaver recalled to Vice. Weaver's former spokesperson, Candace Bouchot, as well as two other sources, confirmed that Weaver had described the governor's request to them right after it occurred. I don't know. You got 600 or so people watching. Is the former mayor of Flint an anonymous source? Is the former mayor of Flint on the record that the governor of Michigan essentially asked her to obstruct justice? That's obstruction of justice. Asking Elijah Cummings, when he was alive, to, quote, back off from investigating me for perjuring myself. That's an anonymous source. I also had the picture at the top. The picture at the top of this story. That's Christina Murphy, Flint resident, that in 2017, the governor's right-hand man showed up in her living room, her and her husband's living room. They're not married anymore. Her husband, Christina Murphy's husband, had blown his lid at a town hall, a Flint water town hall. The media covered it. He got removed by police. He flipped out at the lack of action by the governor and the state. A couple weeks after that, the governor's right-hand man, Richard Baird, is in their living room next to a state trooper and a former Army colonel, offering to pay for her husband's medical treatment. Her husband had seizures, significant cognitive problems, couldn't remember when he was driving how to get home because of the Flint water. He's having seizures. She was on the record bravely because she was threatened. She was threatened, and she bravely went on the record to tell that story. After the Vice story, I wish I had it when we published the Vice story, I got the audio of that meeting where he is calling her husband, "You're going to be my pilot program. If this treatment, it's called chelation therapy, works for you, chelation therapy, it injects, I don't know what, but it injects something in your body that extracts lead out. If it works for you, we're going to make it available to all residents. You're going to be my, quote, lead poster child." That governor's right-hand man was just charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, extortion, and misconduct in office related to the misuse of funds, which is associated with that. Here's the audio that the Detroit Metro Times, an alternative outlet that's not corrupt like the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press, when I handed this to them, they didn't say, "Oh, we can't invest in this." They said, "How soon can we do this?" Because that's what real journalists do, folks. When you have evidence of corruption, they want it out. They want the people to know. I just dropped the link in. You can listen to all that audio. By the way, I also have audio on the record of a Flint resident who met with the governor's right-hand man. That resident, not anonymous, he said, "Yeah, Rich Baird, the governor's right-hand man, he told me he was paying for that family's medical treatment out of his pocket. The state wasn't paying for it." A lie. The state was paying for it. But they told Christina and her husband, "Don't tell anyone who's paying for it. Shh." Sorry that I'm burping. Indigestion. What can I do? So this editor, the editor-in-chief of the Detroit News, has the gall to say to me, especially that don't rely on anonymous sources. Are you kidding me? First of all, if you go through the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press, 9 out of 10 of their stories are anonymous sources because, unfortunately, when you're dealing with criminal matters, a lot of people won't go on the record. It's up to the journalists to confirm that the information they are giving you is accurate. Good journalists do that. The majority of the sources for the Vice story were not anonymous. FYI, we also had documents from the criminal investigation. So, you won't do it because a lot of this has been out already? No. That Vice story, 99.9% of what we broke had never been reported. 99% of what we reported had never been out there. So he's lying about what we reported is not new. It is new, all of it. He's lying about that it's all anonymous sources. Most of them were on the record. So I responded, "Thanks, Gary. Actually, 75% of this has never been reported. New. Much more. The chief of staff Dillon, the Treasury Secretary for Michigan, Baird, the governor's right-hand man, were all confidentially subpoenaed. We have the documents and quoted from the interviews. Second, the Flint mayor is on the record with several others confirming she told them this, what Governor Snyder asked her to do. That Snyder asked the mayor to get Elijah Cummings of the Federal House Oversight Committee to back off of investigating him. Feel free to go ask Cummings' former aides if Snyder was cooperating with their requests in late 2018 and early 2019. I did. The Murphys aren't anonymous. They are both on the record that Snyder's right-hand man came to their home and offered state-funded treatment after Adam raised hell and got media attention at a town hall. The catch, you can't tell the media or talk to people about who is paying for it. Kerry Weber is not anonymous. Baird tried to pay her off. Neither is, I left this person's name out, neither is Bruce Steers, who said Baird told him he was paying for the treatment out of his own pocket. I reviewed the text messages and emails to show the health department was paying for it, not Rich Baird. Feel free to ask all of these folks. And I gave him their numbers. Hey, you want to verify my reporting? Here's their numbers. Call them. Baird nor Snyder responded to 7 to 10 attempts of me reaching out. I'm sure that has nothing to do with the statute of limitations, right? Because the statute of limitations for charges was coming up. Yes, there are some anonymous sources. As I'm sure you know, oftentimes confidential information that comes from sources connected to a criminal investigation have to be protected. I don't know you from a hole in the wall. I spelled hole wrong. And I know you recently took over, but I do know that the Detroit News aired on the side of quasi-press releases supporting Snyder for the last 6 or 7 years. That statement might turn you off or seem harsh, but you know what I think is harsher? Poor children not being able to read and write or articulate. 35 to 45-year-olds dying. I'm in contact with 10 recurrently. Maybe I'm a little aggressive. You know why? Because corruption persists when the media is complicit in covering it up rather than covering it. Feel free to check all the facts. The story is airtight. That's just 2 editors and their ridiculous, fact-free, bullshit excuses for not only not agreeing to publish the stories originally. Credit to Vice, who published that story. Credit to The Intercept, who published this recent one. But who won't even touch it after the fact. Let me ask you a question. How are the people of Flint supposed to be fighting back? How are the people of Detroit? How's America supposed to pressure their government, pressure the Attorney General for real justice if they don't even know what new information is coming out? If the Detroit Free Press won't publish it, if the Detroit News won't publish it, I haven't even gotten to the Flint Journal, which in the recent podcast I did with Michael Moore, he shared, we used to call them growing up the GM urinal, the General Motors urinal, because they would just regurgitate whatever the hell General Motors executives told them. The Flint Journal is also corrupt. They won't report any of this. Even when, if you want to say, well, Jordan, argument's sake, devil's advocate, don't they have to verify what you reported? I've handed them what I've reported. I've handed them the documentation behind it. I reached out to the Associated Press reporter for Michigan, who I think is a nice guy. I'm not going to mention his name. I think he's a nice guy. I said, hey, the Associated Press just kind of wrote up what the charges were against the governor, misdemeanor charges. Don't you kind of think it's important to include the fact that a recent investigation, you don't have to mention my name, I don't give a damn, that a recent investigation broke that the governor, his chief of staff, and health director were on the phone like a bunch of drunken teenagers for 2 straight days while a deadly water disease was setting off alarm bells all over state government? You don't think that's relevant? The Associated Press? You don't think it's relevant that there was a briefing we found addressed to Governor Snyder that mentioned this Legionella outbreak that he claimed he didn't know anything about? Like, Am I in the twilight zone, or are all of these outlets intentionally covering it up? Yes, coronavirus is a thing. Yes, at the time we published this, we were fresh off the Capitol attack. Yes, Trump was being impeached a second time. By the way, why do you think the Attorney General of Michigan announced misdemeanor charges against the governor right after the Capitol was attacked, the day after the President Trump was impeached for a second time, and a few days before inauguration? Wouldn't that be a bad time to announce criminal charges against Governor Snyder if you actually want the media to pay attention to it? If you actually want the media to report on the charges you have filed against the governor, to report extensively, sounds like she picked a pretty bad time to do that. Kind of signifies to me, maybe she put it out there because it was a bad time, because she knew it would only get brief headlines instead of significant news coverage. Because the truth is, the original investigation, as we broke, and 2 other journalists have independently confirmed, was going to charge significantly more than the Democratic Attorney General charged. She charged a governor that we just showed you, I'll use the word allegedly to be fair, was allegedly involved in the cover-up. Not neglecting his duty, which were the charges, involved in obstruction of justice, involved in misconduct in office, and according to many sources I have, they were going for involuntary manslaughter. They thought there was evidence to charge with involuntary manslaughter. So you tell me, what's going on here, Michigan? What's going on here, USA Today? What's going on here, the Associated Press? You know, I didn't go to journalism school. I don't have a master's from Columbia Journalism or Northwestern Journalism School, and I think I'm damn proud I don't, because I think they teach you a lot of toxic shit, like being a robot, be neutral, be a robot. Yeah, I'm not neutral to children being poisoned. I'm not neutral to the biggest cover-up of the 21st century. And you want to know something? As a journalist, the number one thing is not whether you have an opinion or not. The number one thing is not whether you're neutral to certain things. The most important thing, are your facts correct? Everything after that is window dressing. Are your facts correct, or are they not correct? That is the most important thing. And yes, based on the factual reporting that I and Jen have diligently broke for many years on Flint, I do have an opinion on that. And you want to know what that opinion is? The governor knew what was going on. He dispatched his right-hand man, who, by the way, there's going to be more that comes out soon, that governor's right-hand man put in writing ways that he covers things up. So he wasn't so good at covering it up because I found it. What kind of journalist are you if you're neutral to a cover-up that poisoned people? You're not supposed to be neutral to that. You're not supposed to help bury the information because you can't invest in it. Are you kidding me? The Detroit Free Press, the Detroit News, the Associated Press, MSNBC, and I know people are going to say, Jordan, don't burn every bridge. Well, to hell with it. For years, and by the way, I spoke with Jen today. We are going to work on doing a documentary one day on the corporate media corruption because they are complicit. You are complicit. Silence is complicity. We see those signs going around. White silence is complicity. Well, corporate media silence is complicit. And I don't give a fucking shit. Excuse my French. I don't care if the coronavirus is going on. I don't care if there's an impeachment going on. It doesn't matter because these outlets all have more resources than I do. The Status Coup does. They certainly have more resources than The Intercept does, that Vice does. They got more reporters, more money than all of us. So they do have the resources to walk and chew gum at the same time. Thank you, Timothy, $49.99. Appreciate it. So to hell with it. I've been diplomatic. I bit my tongue for years. And by the way, that's just 2 responses I got. I got responses from editors asking me on Flint, is there any connection to Trump? I'll show you that one day. I have responses from editors literally asking me, is there any, we don't, this is really big information, but we don't really use freelancers. So I said, okay, well, can you ask HR if you could temporarily use a freelancer to cover the biggest cover up? Forget environmental, cover up. By the way, part of the reason it was difficult for me to even get Michael Moore, who I very much appreciate having me on his podcast recently, go listen to it. I was on Rumble. I really appreciate it. Part of the reason it was so goddamn difficult to get his attention is because the media wasn't reporting what we were breaking. Do you know? And by the way, I will show you this in the future. Do you know, okay? If you remember a couple years ago, Jen and I broke pretty significant story. We did a documentary about it. We haven't been able to get that documentary picked up yet. We're working on it. So for the people, I saw people on Twitter, Jordan, you scam people out of money and you didn't even release a documentary. Shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. We have been working very hard to get Flushing Flint picked up because it is important information. It is important reporting. It is important corruption. And we want to have maximum eyeballs on it. We've tried Netflix, we've tried Hulu, we've tried Amazon, we've tried everybody. Yes, swear jar, thank you. So, a lot of documentaries, it takes years to get the funding or distribution. So, spare me. I didn't scam anyone. So, we broke this story, which got a lot of response, that Rick Snyder, who the Attorney General just charged with a parking ticket, a misdemeanor, his environmental department was literally going into people's homes in Flint and running their water right before collecting lead and copper samples. The very lead and copper data that the governor used to declare Flint's water restored, all better now, in 2018, and shut down the remaining free water bottle stations that desperate, poor, poison people relied upon. He shut it down in April based on this lead and copper data. We, Jen and I, in the early days, before Status Coup was even the official name, we knocked on nearly 450 doors in Flint. We found that they were doing this. We met with Newsweek. Pretty corporate outlet, but still a big outlet. We met with Newsweek about it. They signed on to doing it. Jen, I'll never forget this. Jen, because it was a complicated story. It's water testing, so it's not the sexiest thing. Jen created a binder, very organized binder, with our findings. We met with them in New York, in their wonderful corporate building, literally down the street from Wall Street, by the way. Great backdrop for a corrupt outlet. Thank you, Steve, $4.99. Swear jar, Jordan, keep the fire coming. Richard, $4.99. Swear jar. And Ambel, $5. Thanks for everything you do. Love this reporting. I wonder what you think of NPR too. I'll get to NPR. Courtney, $20. I love your setup, but we need to fund you a legit studio and great lighting. This channel needs to blow up and be seen, and I think that would help you. You're awesome. By the way, I said this 2 days ago, and I said it at the beginning of this stream. I'm talking to Ty, who used to work with us, still a friend of the show. He's working now for Stephen Colbert. He's going to, I don't know when, because we want to be safe. He was just in L.A., which has a lot of COVID. But pretty soon, he's going to come over. We're going to purchase a lot of new equipment and make this look a lot better, because I know there's lighting problems. You know, obviously, we are Status Coup, but we don't want to look like Status Poo. So Ty is going to help me. It's going to require money, hint, hint. Sign up as a member, statuscoup.com/join. But we will be sprucing this thing up because I know there's lighting and other problems. Unfortunately, I don't have the money for a full-time tech person to be with me. So I can't fix lighting and tech stuff on the fly because it's not my expertise. I don't know how to do it. So I am talking to Ty, and he will be coming over to help out with setting up a new system, lighting, all that stuff. So If you're already a member, you could further help out with funding that. Hint, hint. GoFundMe. I just put it in there. And the super chats, GoFundMe, the whole thing. So, Newsweek, they sign on to the story, to do that water testing story that I just showed you, that Tulsi Gabbard responded to. Congresswoman, when she was a congresswoman. Congressman Ro Khanna responded. Who else responded? Ro, Tulsi, Susan Sarandon, Alyssa Milano, you name it. Celebrities, politicians responded. This needs to be investigated. This is criminal. They cooked the numbers. They were sending environmental officials into people's homes, running their water, which is against the federal regulations for how you test for lead and copper. And then they were getting, no lead in this home. Yeah, because we flushed the goddamn lead out. So they signed on to the story. We, Jen and I, fly to Flint the week it's supposed to come out we were doing GoFundMe and things, but on your dime, because they had signed on to the story. We're going to break it this week. We want to be in Flint when it breaks, interview residents, interview other people. Literally, 2 days before it's supposed to break, I get an email from them. They kill the story, saying, we don't think there's enough data. We don't think there's enough data. I don't have the email redacted. I will show this at a later date. I don't want to show you the email because I don't want to dox people, their email accounts. I responded as diplomatically as I can, but also as forcefully as I can, saying, when is the last time you know of that journalists in America knocked on 450 doors anywhere? When is the last time journalists in America have knocked on 4 doors for any type of investigation? We found over 30 residents that were on the official state testing program. Over 30. The official state testing program that Governor Snyder used to claim the water was fine. They tested these same homes over 2 years to see if the lead levels were going down. We found over 30 residents that either state officials went into their homes and cheated, ran the water, or the residents were told to do it that way by state officials. Meaning, the state officials either cooked the data themselves or played the residents as fools and told them to cheat. I said, how much data do you need? By the way, we're only 2 people. We knocked on these doors in boiling heat. If we released the documentary for members, you saw I had a towel around me walking around. We knocked on these doors in the boiling heat. We went back in the fall. If we found 30 members by knocking on 500 doors, 450 doors, how many more do you think there are? Flint has 95,000 residents. We found 33 residents. We also found that they were putting residents on the official state testing program that had full home filtration systems, meaning they had full, not just filters in their faucet, full at the point of entry filtration. You're not supposed to put people with full filtration systems in the state testing group. You don't have enough data? Here's what really happened. Their lawyers told them, we don't want to go with this outlet. We don't want to go with these 2 reporters. We don't want to open up Newsweek to the risk. Even though we had every single resident
on the record. I taped and I asked for their permission. I recorded every single one that we interviewed. And a lot of them are on camera. Not enough data? Newsweek is corrupt. So, frankly, there's a lot of outlets out there that claim to be journalists, and they push around a lot of evidence-free bullshit. They say, well, we might not have the evidence, but there's no evidence that it didn't happen, i.e., a double negative. Some outlets, well, there might not be definitive evidence that the election was stolen, but there's no evidence it wasn't. What kind of bullshit nonsense are you spewing? That could be said for anything. Thank you, Arlene, $5. Love the info you're sharing, Jordan. Hey, Anat, my beautiful wife. So, unlike some outlets, we do the hard work of finding the evidence. I have given, and Jen, I have sacrificed relationships in my family, time with my family. I have sacrificed time with my friends. I've sacrificed time with my then girlfriend, then fiance, now wife. And I'm not asking for accolades for doing this. I do it because I think this is important. I don't think it's just about Flint. It ain't just about Flint. It's about, do we as a country allow our government to poison its citizens, cover it up, and then leave them to die? That's much bigger than Flint, Michigan. It's about corruption. The reason they were on that water system, that toxic water, was because they were trying to privatize the water in Michigan. It's about corruption, by the way, not just of the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party, too. By the way, the Democratic Party, who now has control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, now controls the House Oversight Committee. There's nothing stopping them from dragging Governor Rick Snyder back in front of Congress, where he told them 4 years ago, I didn't know about this deadly Legionella outbreak until January 2016. Well, we just showed you evidence exists. He knew about it 16 months earlier. Not only that he knew about it, not only that he neglected it, he helped cover it up. He helped cover up people drinking deadly water. He didn't publicly notify them at that time, as soon as he knew. Stop drinking the water. Which, by the way, probably would have made him look like a hero. You know what that a spokesperson for the House Oversight Committee, which used to be chaired by Elijah Cummings, who died, I think, last year. I know for a fact Elijah Cummings was trying to drag him back. You know what the House Oversight Committee said to me? We are closely monitoring the criminal investigation regarding former Governor Snyder, and we will consider additional steps based on the outcome of the court proceedings. You know what that's called? A bunch of mumbo-jumbo bullshit. So I wrote back, I'm not following. There's zero precluding you, the House Oversight Committee, which is federal, from bringing Governor Snyder back in for further questioning on what it seems to be perjury, which I think is a pretty significant crime, perjuring yourself in front of Congress. I'm pretty sure there is nothing precluding you from doing that now. Okay, you want to say we got other things to investigate first? Trump, COVID, okay. There's nothing precluding you from doing that while the state criminal investigation and trials are going on. I gave the example of Robert Mueller when he was investigating Trump and his campaign federally. The state of New York, the New York Southern District, they were investigating Trump federally, on a state level, Trump and his business. It happens all the time. You have parallel federal and state investigations happening simultaneously. So riddle me this. Why is the Democratic House, who now, they got control of everything, the Senate, the White House, the House, and by the way, the Department of Justice. We could pretend the Department of Justice is separate, but it's not. They can do whatever the hell they want. Why is it that they are, quote, considering additional steps based on the outcome of court proceedings? Well, first of all, these court proceedings could take 2 to 3 years. A trial, if it even goes to trial against Governor Snyder in Michigan, that's not going to happen for 6 months to a year, a trial. So you're telling us that the people of Flint, the people of Michigan, the people of America potentially will have to wait 2 to 3 years for the Democratic House to drag Rick Snyder in because federal perjury charges are different and serious, and they could file federal perjury charges on top of the federal government. The Democrats can charge federal perjury on top of this misdemeanor parking ticket the Michigan AG just charged Snyder with. So you're going to wait till court proceedings end, which could take 2 years? Okay, well, what are you going to do in 2022 if and when the Republican Party retakes the House, which is very possible? Democrats only have a 4-seat majority. It is asinine. It is ridiculous. It is borderline corrupt. And they're doing this. The House Oversight Committee, it's all connected, folks. They're doing this because they know no journalists are going to contact them. Do you know? I believe firmly I'm the first journalist that even reached out to them for comment. I don't know if the Michigan governor is charged criminally on the state level. Wouldn't a journalist think, hey, let me reach out to the House because he probably perjured himself in front of the House? Because that's a federal crime. Nobody did. They know they could get away with doing nothing because there's no media that will ever hold them accountable. Thank you, Levon, $9.99. Northwestern Journalism School is run by Al Fromm. Al Fromm created the Democratic Leadership Council and the Progressive Policy Institute, both notorious corporate Democratic think tanks. You learn something every day from your viewers. I had no idea. Could you email me that, Levon, so I don't lose it? info@statuscoup.com. I want to look him up. Let's not even get started on Harvard and its corrupt connections. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not just ranting for the hell of it. I'm ranting because I am showing you the corporate media in this country is corrupt. The corporate media is in bed with the politicians covering this shit up. Frankly, there's a whole censorship debate going on online, and some people don't like my position. That's okay. You don't have to agree with me on everything. This is a different form of censorship, and frankly, I think an equally dangerous form of censorship. Because the gatekeepers, unfortunately, Status Coup is not big enough yet, where if we break something on our own, we're huge and it's just going to be picked up everywhere. I hope one day that's the case. It's not the case right now. So we have to push corporate outlets to pick it up to get it in the mainstream. Because the only way, frankly, attorney generals, governors, anybody, presidents are going to do anything for the people of Flint or people of any community like it is if you light a goddamn inferno up their ass, if you challenge their power, and if you threaten their power, not violently, but if the information gets out, because without the information, people cannot activate themselves to pressure their government. Information is a requirement of pressuring your government. That's why independent media is so important. That's why I always beg you. Some people complain, stop asking for money. Well, if you want to invite me to your backyard with your money tree so that we can fund going to Flint and breaking this information, then I'll stop asking for money. But until you, whatever assholes say that, invite me to their money tree, I don't want to hear it. We're not asking you for money like other outlets to survive. And then we do God knows what with that money. I'm talking about the Young Turks, by the way. It's very clear what we do with your money. You see it. We go places. We investigate. We break shit. We give a microphone to people who don't get it in corporate media. So I don't want to hear any more from progressive outlets pretending to be journalists. They're not. They push evidence-free, theoretical shit and dress it up as journalism. We do actual journalism. And I think it's time progressives in America. I'm not getting involved with Fraud Squad and the food fight online. Listen, I think some people are thinking relatively extreme. Sometimes politicians don't agree with you. Sometimes you have to try harder and shame them harder. Doesn't mean they're frauds. It doesn't mean let's cancel everybody because they're not doing what we want right away. We're not 16 years old, folks. If AOC doesn't do what you want right away, then you pressure her. If she doesn't do what you want, then you threaten her power, threaten to primary her. That's what you do. Don't call her a fraud. Don't call her this bullshit. We're only dividing ourselves. But people need to realize, and I'm telling you, and I'm taking my glasses off for this. I'm not saying don't gather and protest outside the Capitol. Well, don't go and try to storm and take over the Capitol. But I'm not saying don't go and protest outside the Capitol. I'm not saying don't go and protest outside politicians' offices like the Sunrise Movement and AOC protested outside of Pelosi's office. I'm not saying don't go and protest outside, BlackRock corporate headquarters. I've covered protests there. I'm not saying don't go and protest outside Raytheon's offices. I'm not saying don't go and protest in the streets for George Floyd and others. I think all of this is great. But you're missing a key component. We need protest outside national and local media in this country. I want to be very clear so it's not distorted. I am not discussing any form of violence. I condemn any form of violence. Do not be violent towards journalists, even corporate ones, even frauds. We are not Donald Trump. We do not advocate any form of violence, sending anything in the mail or that's not what I'm talking about. We're better than that. But why should CNN, why should the Detroit Free Press, why should the Detroit News, why should the Associated Press? Oh, because I went in front of the mic, you didn't hear it. I was saying, I'm not talking about violence. To be very clear, we are better than Trump. We are better than MAGA. I'm not talking about being violent. I'm not talking about sending things in the mail. No, we're better than that. No violence, period. But why should the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit News, the Flint Journal, the Associated Press, Newsweek, and countless other outlets that intentionally choose to bury cover-ups why should they just be comfortable doing that with no heat on them? Why should the New York Times, who, by the way, tried to steal one of our stories 2 years ago, the water testing story, I reached out to them to break it with them. They gave me a load of bullshit. Oh, we have reporters, so we'll look into it. And then they called my source with the information I gave them to basically steal it from me. They should not be comfortable because at this point, They are not journalists and they're not media. They are part of cover-ups. Let me repeat that. They are, if they're not gonna agree to do the story at the outset, and then they're not going to agree to cover it after the fact, then they're not doing journalism. They are complicit in government officials covering up corruption. They are complicit in the government officials that covered up Flint. Period. End of story. And let me tell you something. The reason our politicians are so corrupt, the reason our government is so corrupt, is because the media allows them to be corrupt. Because the media repeats the lies that government officials tell them and dress it up as breaking news. That's what CNN does. Ooh, sources tell us. You mean the government officials that feed you bullshit? Like Kellyanne Conway for the last 4 years? The media, we need to get the media and make the media less comfortable with being complicit and corrupt. Again, I'll say it again for those in the back, not talking about being violent. These people should be able to leave their offices and get home safely. I'm not talking about go protest outside their homes. That's not what I'm talking about. Violence takes away from what I'm talking about. Violence lets them deflect from the cover-up, the corruption that they are covering up, and it lets them deflect onto us and call us extremists. So no violence. And I understand what I'm advocating for right now is very difficult. We're in a pandemic. Frankly, I wouldn't advise that at this moment. There's coronavirus. There's now mutations of the coronavirus. I'm not saying thousands of people show up outside the Detroit Free Press. But if they're going to cover this shit up, then they should hear from the people. And I'm not talking about calling them. I'm not talking about emailing them. I'm talking about show up and tell them it is not okay for you to pass on stories that show a criminal cover-up that poisoned poor people. It is not okay for once it's published for you to ignore it. And we will not only protest you, we will protest the advertisers funding you. All the wine moms and resistance, they want to protest Tucker Carlson's advertisers and Fox's advertisers. Great, go nuts. That's fine. Why are we not protesting the advertisers supporting the cover-ups at the journalists, if you want to call them that, covering this information up at the Detroit Free Press, at the Detroit News, at the Flint Journal, at the Associated Press, at BuzzFeed, Daily Beast, you name it. And I don't give a damn if this hurts my chances of getting published in those outlets, because those outlets have showed us time and time again they're not going to cover this stuff. Hell, I met with BuzzFeed's editor-in-chief 2 years ago at BuzzFeed to try and break that story on the water testing. He passed. He's now the media columnist at the New York Times, Ben Smith. The media is corrupt. The media is complicit. We need to shame the media. We saw one little thing during the 2016 campaign in Los Angeles. People protested outside CNN's headquarters. That is not enough. So I want you to truly think about this, folks, because I only showed you 2 emails. If I had more time, which I didn't today, oh my God, I have a treasure chest of emails that I could show you from editors passing on critical stories. So there's only 3 options. Number 1, there are a bunch of wealthy, white people living on the coast who just don't give a damn about what's going on in Flint. Yeah, they'll tweet about it with a hashtag now and then, but they don't care what's going on in Flint or communities like it. So they're not going to invest their resources in breaking it. That's one option. The second option is they don't want the information out there for whatever reason. Some media outlets do get subsidies from the states they operate in. Some media outlets have advertisers that don't want certain things out there. And the third option kind of goes back to the first option. we hear a lot. We hear a lot about the need for more diversity in our government. The need for more diversity in our government. Not just race, gender, but economic diversity. We need more working people in our government, less millionaires in our government, socioeconomic diversity. We need a lot more diversity in our media, and I ain't just talking about more black journalists. Yes, we need that. More Latino journalists, more indigenous journalists. We need less wealthy white people on our television as gatekeepers to what is and isn't happening in this country. We need more working people as news anchors, as reporters. Frankly, if you had more working people as anchors, you'd have a lot more working people as guests. Melissa Mays, one of the leading activists in Flint, who I've interviewed many, many times, she'd be on CNN if you actually had people like me on CNN. By the way, I don't want to be on CNN. The Sunday morning shows, the newspaper columnists, CNN's roundtable, MSNBC's roundtable, it's all wealthy white people who probably haven't stepped foot in Flint, Michigan since 2016, if they even went then, who 100% didn't show up to Standing Rock because I did, and they weren't there. Never showed up to the front lines of a pipeline fight. They'll show up if a black person getting executed gets a lot of protesters out, but they're not going to show up if there's less attention. I showed up in Dallas in 2019 when 26-year-old Botham Jean was murdered in his apartment. I went, and that wasn't. It was a national media story, but it was not the George Floyd protests. It was not the Breonna Taylor level coverage. I went with Ty. They're either corrupt and don't want the information up, or they don't give a shit. I think it's a mixture of both. We are going to continue digging, not just on Flint, but other stories, because that's what we do. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a human being. It really frustrates me when we break major stories, when I spend 16, 17 hours a day for the last 2 months on this story we just broke with The Intercept, and they bury it. It frustrates me and it hurts me, not for me, but for Flint. Listen, I'm not in this for more Twitter followers, folks. I am in this for more paid members because that's the only way that we're going to be able to fund more of this. It's the only way we grow. Through you. Small dollar subscriptions, $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join. Get in there, statuscoup.com/join. But it is soul sucking when you work hard and the rest of the media that should be all over this. The media is supposed to elevate good reporting and follow up on that good reporting with its own reporting. That's how it's supposed to work in a healthy system. Unfortunately, that's not how it's working. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't. To answer your questions, some of you asked, Jen is still sick. Sam has been helping out in the super chat. Jen, unfortunately, is still suffering from coronavirus. She still has a low-grade fever. It's now been over 2 months, so she is one of what they're calling a long hauler, COVID long hauler. It's definitely scary because you just don't know. You just don't know in that circumstance. I mean, you don't even know if you were like me, who had the worst of my symptoms were about 2 to 3 weeks. But I've developed in the last few weeks a cough. I got tested. It wasn't coronavirus. So I've developed a cough. I really don't know. Is that a long-term symptom of coronavirus? We just don't know. This is too early on in this disease, coronavirus, which, by the way, over 4,000 people died yesterday of coronavirus. 4,000. We've just become so numb. Over 4,000 people died yesterday. So I'm worried about Jen. I'm not going to lie. Not just because she's had a fever for this long, but I'm worried about the long-term damage that might come from this. But, she is still, when she has the energy, she is still working, helping out. So that's the update. She's doing her best while being severely fatigued. So, she has a bad cough still, low-grade fever, and frankly, understandably, a little depressed. So I know she appreciates all the emails that you guys have been sending her. info@statuscoup.com if you want to send her your well wishes. info@statuscoup.com. And statuscoup.com says join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month.